This is not a sponsor review. I am not getting paid by miHoYo to make this. Zenless Zone Zero is out. We've all played it for a week, and now that the dust has settled, I'm going to be giving my overall thoughts about the game, both my personal highs and lows. Before I talk about the game itself, I want to briefly talk about the development team behind it. miHoYo, or internationally known as HoYoverse, has been in the gacha market for more or less a decade at this point. This is an industry veteran that knows the ins and outs. Any gameplay or progression systems that may seem to hinder or inconvenience you are there for player retention. It is working exactly as intended. Now, I myself am someone with refined tastes, and looking back on the script for this video, I feel as if I'm putting the game under stricter watch since I know miHoYo is capable of making some amazing games. With that in mind, let's dive right in. Generally, with the reviews I do, I record my first hour of the game and see how smooth it is. The first hour of this game is, well, very smooth. Mechanics get introduced one at a time. You start with a small cast of characters and learn about the game world. This is what a proxy refers to, this is what the holo refers to. The stylistic aesthetics does a good job of masking the simplicity of the gameplay and story, and for what it's worth, it works pretty well. At no point did I get overwhelmed with mechanics and information. And here's a fun fact, Triple Z is the first miHoYo game to be set outside the Honkai-verse. Having experienced Honkai Impact, I realized that even Genshin shares the same universe. New Eridu will be the first brand new world created by miHoYo, unless I'm jinxing myself and Kiana starts appearing in the holo. In terms of performance, I played on PC because I honestly can't see myself playing one of these brawler games on a phone. But on the PC, I never had any issues or glitches. The comic CGs are beautifully drawn, the English dub is actually pretty decent, and the style is distinctively different than miHoYo's other works. For most players, in terms of performance alone, Triple Z had a very smooth launch. The only thing I don't quite understand is why the game is 55GB in size and takes over 100 to allocate space, since I highly doubt this game is anywhere near the density of the other miHoYo games. This is going to be a barrier of entry for some, considering if you already have other miHoYo games installed on your phone. In Triple Z, you play as Wise or Belle, the male or female avatar respectively, who are the managers for a video rental store on 6th Street. Their lives double as proxies, which is kinda like knowing the skills to navigate those lost in the hollows, which is kinda like an alternate dimension where these ethereal monsters roam. The interface for the maps and navigation is displayed with these CRT televisions, with splitting paths and puzzles sprinkled in throughout. I thought this was a pretty cool design choice. It's clear that story is definitely not miHoYo specializes in. I overall found the story to be coherent and flows well, but you're not going to remember this game for its narrative. There is quite a number of quality of life features that allow for better navigation, like if you tap or click on a square, then the on-screen avatar will automatically go there while avoiding the obstacles. You can drag around the map and even hold down the shift key to make the animations faster. This kind of design will work amazingly in a single-player game, but if you were to do this every single day to complete commissions, I can see how it could potentially become tedious. In terms of the main combat, you will assemble a team of 3 characters and 1 Bang Boo, which is kinda like this small mechanized robot thing for additional buffs. Each character has a normal attack, a dash attack, a skill, and an ult. Swapping units is done with only 1 button this time, and they will cycle in the order that the team was placed in. Whenever an enemy has a flashing yellow attack, you can either evade it or swap to the next character to parry it, though there is a limit on how many times that can be performed at a time. I overall found the parry timings to be very generous, though not all attacks are telegraphed with the yellow flash. If I were to describe the core gameplay loop, it's sort of like a simplified and more stylish version of Honkai Impact's gameplay. Having played both at this point, I will say that Triple Z's combat is pretty easy to understand, considerably more so than miHoYo's first attempt at creating a brawler game. That being said, there's still going to be strategies involving with team building, rotations, and such. In terms of the character designs and animations, it is on par with some of the best I've seen in this genre. miHoYo has already cemented itself as the king of 3D gacha games. Even though the genre is distinctively different from their other games, at no point did the models or animations look jagged or out of place. I can't speak about the mobile version, but the PC one is extremely crisp. Something else I quite like, that I appreciate is becoming the norm, is that the stamina system will reset every 24 hours, so you technically just have to log in once per day to get rid of everything. And not only that, when you actually do farm the materials themselves, you can freely choose how many enemies in a wave you want, and this will adjust the total amount of stamina spent. When you get to the later stages, you can even form presets in case you want to farm a very specific group of materials. The game space is not open world for once, but there are small maps that you can walk through to do certain activities. It even follows a time cycle where certain activities are available at specific times of the day. You even browse Reddit before going to sleep. Now that's realism. The combat elements only begin when you do a commissioned quest, and the levels themselves are linear. I would be lying if the lo-fi music, the overall feel of the game didn't resemble the day-to-day cycle from a Persona game, but just without the turn-based elements. Characters are split into 4 and 5 stars. You can either level them, level the skills, or level something called the W engine, which is more or less a weapon or something akin to Star Rail's light cones. At first, I was surprised to see that there was no RNG artifact system. Pretty bold choice. But then I saw the 6 blank circles surrounding the W engine slot. Yeah, I know exactly what's gonna go in there, miHoYo. I also want to talk about the progression. This game seems to be much more restrictive in what you can do when starting an account. Usually I'm the type of player that wants the freedom to do whatever, like if I wanted to overlevel my units and completely breeze through the main campaign, I should be able to do that. Not here though. A lot of the different gameplay features are not unlocked until you get through some of the main story chapters. Normally, I don't have a problem with this, except there are quite a number of mechanics that are just not introduced to the player until like at least 5 or so hours into the game. It took me 2 or so hours just to unlock the stamina system and get to go farming. Another hour or so to unlock the daily errands. At one point, I thought I could outsmart miHoYo by being able to ascend my characters early from farming the tier 1 upgrade material and then fusing it to the next tier. Nope, can't do that. This game will decide what you can do at what stage in your journey. Personally, I prefer a more open-ended method for progression. Give the players the means to access everything. If they aren't skilled or strong enough to do that, then they will simply come back later. If they want to put the main story on hold and then grind the living hell out of resources, they should be able to do that. I've never really been a fan of locking features behind main story completion or level requirements, but I'm sure some people are okay with it. If we take a look at the gacha rates and monetization, usually I would explain it briefly, but you likely came from another miHoYo game to begin with, so you'll know exactly what it is. You get a random standard 5-star after 50 pulls, then a selector after 300. Now, the game is obviously going to be very generous at launch, but if we assume that they give the same amount of currencies versus their other games, then the average wait time between getting a shiny new 5-star should be similar. I don't have a problem with any of this, but there is something I want to bring up. The generosity of gacha rates is often quite hard to measure. I like to think that the rates are related to the context of what you can do with each character you pull. Unlike Genshin and Star Rail, ZZZ is not an open world game. You can't use any of the agents you pulled to roam the city, as the game forces you to use either Wise or Bell. You only get to see your units while in combat, so the context that you can use your characters are different versus the open world games, yet they use the same gacha rates. This even includes the scuffed 75% weapon rate up chance for the W engines. Though there is a second rate up guarantee, so at least you're not left off spending thousands of your dollars and potentially getting nothing. So one slight correction. ZZZ's gacha system does have one very subtle and hidden rule that's different from Genshin or Star Rail. As you know, every 10 pulls will guarantee a 4-star, but this pity does not coincide with the 5-star pity. This means if a 5-star appears at the same pull as a 4-star, the 4-star guarantee will be pushed back to the 11th pull. In other words, when you get a 5-star in Genshin or Star Rail, there will also be a 4-star tagged along in that 10 pull. However, this guarantee is not present in ZZZ. It is possible to go without a 4-star for a maximum of 19 pulls, assuming that the 10th pull is replaced by a 5-star. So when you get a 5-star in this game, it's possible that it's the only non-3-star item in that multi. This difference is hidden in a very fine print, where the game states that every 10 pulls will have at least one 4-star or 5-star, meaning getting a 5-star will reset this guarantee. Now, you can argue that since the base rate of 4 stars is higher, this does balance things out. Given the vivid and detailed animations of even the 4 stars, it's possible that making them will still take more effort than the same in Genshin. Something I will give credit for is how cool the gacha animations look. I've never seen a game do this kind of style, but the music even changes to having rap vocals if you get a 5-star character, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, you gotta have the gacha animations be really flashy and fun. How else are you gonna inject more dopamine into your players? That's the one thing you have to get right. You can't really put a rating on gameplay, so it'll either click with you or it doesn't. Doubly so in this industry where the market is extremely saturated. If you're juggling between other gachas at the moment, if the gameplay doesn't mesh well with your personal style, then it's gonna be a hit or miss whether or not someone will want to continue this game. Now, I want to give some feedback to Triple Z's combat system. I've seen some people think that the combat gets pretty complex down the line. I personally disagree. I don't think Triple Z's combat is that complex at all. If you go install Honkai Impact and go through any character tutorial, it is a night and day difference. The combat in this game, at least from my first week experience, seems to be very handholdy in what you're supposed to be doing. From the single button swap feature to the chain attack prompt, it's as if the game is simplifying how rotations and combos work. The game will put everything else on hold when a chain attack happens, and while I'm sure there will be cases where you don't want to switch, the big emphasis on this mechanic almost seems like it's nudging you to swap characters. There's even a line that each agent will say if you've waited too long, telling you to hurry up. Even if a character takes a big hit and is knocked backwards, you can immediately follow up with the next unit in line and recover. It feels like the fast-paced flow is the feeling that the game wants you to constantly be in. At its core, every character will have a central gimmick to work around, which is complex enough to not make you want to button mash, but on a wider scale, much of the combat is simplified from miHoYo's other brawler titles. Taking a look at Honkai Impact, for example, the attack buttons themselves can actually fundamentally change, like the ult buttons are just another form of basic attacks instead of the ult skill. Even Genshin Impact, which has its combat system watered down to be more casual friendly, still requires you to choose which characters to swap to and in what order. There's additional layers of strategy that go into the combat. It's still simple, yes, but you still have to figure out who to swap to at what time. Even then, I don't quite understand why some people seem to be adamant to admit that the gameplay loop is simple. It's as if to encourage the idea that harder and more complex gameplay is better, but I don't think that's true at all. I think there's a lot of value in keeping things simple and making the game marketable to a wider audience. There is a way to turn on a challenge mode during commissions for the seasoned players, but I can almost guarantee you that this mode will not get nearly as much attention as the casual experience, as the game is going to be primarily focused on that instead. I applaud miHoYo for trying out a new style, and in terms of the overall design, aesthetics, and performance, they are all very solid. However, I personally believe this style of gameplay, particularly the 3D brawler type, is already seen quite often in the gacha market at this point. You likely already play a couple other gacha games, maybe even miHoYo's other works. Starville and Genshin both are casual titles, but combined can take quite a large chunk out of your daily routines, not to mention purchasing those welkins and battle passes for low spenders if you spend casually. There's some people that did some estimations online, and if you use the miHoYo Play launcher and play both Genshin and Starville already, you can expect a content patch every 2 weeks for all 3 of these games. I mean, hell, why not just pile on Honkai Impact while you're at it too and become the ultimate miHoYo fan? You just need one account, there's no need to play any other games at that point. Zenless Zone Zero is a very good game, filled with colorful, vibrant, expressive characters. I'm glad it's not another open world since there's like at least 2 more coming in the next year or so. Its systems are remarkably similar to miHoYo's other titles, so a lot of your knowledge of them will easily transfer over here. I would say my complaint is that a lot of the features are locked behind progression, so unless your player level is in the mid-20s to 30s, you won't have access to every gameplay mode or feature. It's a streamlined process that you will do what miHoYo thinks that you can do at what time. So with these first impressions videos, I will also like to make a prediction about the game. I'll look back on this in a year, and I'll either get most of it right or terribly wrong. I predict that the game won't have as much staying power as Genshin or Starrail, but will be very successful nonetheless. Lots of revenue for the first couple months. I'm not being nihilistic about the game at all. I think people tend to put a lot of stock on miHoYo games since they are literally at the top of the industry right now. Most devs would kill to earn a couple million every month. So just because it may not perform well in comparison to their other games, that doesn't mean it's not performing well in general. I say this because for whatever reason, some people in the gacha community believe the revenue figure is the single measure of success in a gacha game. At the end of the day, I don't doubt this game will be very popular. The pre-registrations reached 50 million, a record high for a gacha game. People may look at this and think Triple Z is an overwhelming success, and I agree. But just consider that it's easy to get someone to try out a game, but it's way harder to get them to stay. I mean, look at how many people watching my videos are actually subscribed. Now, I personally likely won't be playing this game. I think the simplistic style just doesn't really appeal to me, but I think in terms of longevity, this game will do just fine. So anyways, that's kind of like my brief first impressions of Zenless Zone Zero. Let me know if you will be personally playing the game. And if you want to catch more gacha related content just like this, you know what to do. Thank you for watching, and as always, have fun out there.